Welcome back to Z-Speed, and thanks for tuning back in. Today we'll be upgrading the speakers in this 2017 Honda Civic Si. So if you're wondering how to access the speakers and change them out, just stay tuned. Let me tell you, this 1.5 liter SI turbo is a blast to drive around as a daily. It really is quite a bit of fun. But when you go to turn on the stereo to listen to some tunes, there's a little bit of a buzzkill because they really skimped on some of the speakers in here. So I'm going to show you how to upgrade, whichever speakers you want. There's quite a few in here. We're going to go over that in a second. But it sounds more like you're listening to a transistor radio than it does a stereo. And there's a little bit of vibration here and there. So we're going to fix that. So let's talk about the goals for this video. I plan on keeping my existing head unit. I will not be swapping that out, and I will not be using any amplifiers. So if you're looking to just upgrade your speakers, this is the video for you. We're going to keep everything the same except swap out some of the existing speakers here, looking for better quality magnets and better quality polyurethane speakers here. So we're going to be replacing everything except the tweeters. I found the tweeters are pretty decent here, but it's the mid-range and the bass that lack. So now let's briefly go over the speaker placement on the Honda Si. You can see the tweeter right here. It's pretty obvious right here. Then we have a mid-range speaker right here. Then we also have a coaxial right here on the dash. I think it's like 3.5 inches, something like that. It's a pretty small little coaxial right here. And in the back, it may be a little different for, let's say, the Sport model or the LX, but the SI actually has 2 tweeters, 2 mid-range, and a subwoofer back here. And when I ordered my speakers, I didn't even know that there were 2 tweeters back there hidden. So I went ahead and ordered 2 coaxials here. This is after the fact. This is my subwoofer. It's a pretty nice one. And a couple coaxials I put back there because I didn't know there was a tweeter, and the tweeter is right up in here. So you don't have to order any tweeters for the rear in the form of a coaxial like I did, and then we'll go over exactly what kind of speakers I got here in a minute. But yeah, that's what the SI configuration is. There's 12 speakers total in the car. Now, at this point, I'm going to recommend that you purchase your stuff through Crutchfield. I'm not sponsored by these guys in any way, shape, or form, but it makes it super easy. They've got pretty much everything you need to make it super easy to mount these speakers in your car. They got mounts, wire harnesses, and the speakers, of course. So, yeah, try it out. And I'm going to show you how I did it. It's pretty easy. Just, type in Crutchfield under Google. Going to go to the Crutchfield website here, and I'll show you how to navigate the website here. Go under car audio, and then you're going to go under the car speakers and sub woofers, and then at this point you can actually type in your exact model. You can see I've typed in my 2017 Si right here, and that will give you everything that fits in your Si or your LX or your Sport or whatever you have. Your car speakers right here, your subwoofers, your speaker wiring harnesses here, and they even have some sound deadening. I actually picked some of that up and put a little sound deadening on my doors as well. So they've got everything you want. You can get as little or as much as you want to make it super easy to install your speakers. So that's why I'm recommending them. This website is because it just makes everything really easy. They've got your little speaker mounts right here too. I picked a couple of those up. So, if you're more advanced, you can get more of these little things to add to your car, or you can get just the basics here. So, whatever level you're at, they've got you covered here. Okay, let's start with the easiest speaker that we've got to remove here, and that's the one on the dashboard. This is the coaxial speaker here, and you can see I'm using a plastic panel removal tool here. I would highly recommend that you grab a few of these to take some of these panels out. You definitely don't want to scratch your dashboard here, or use something that's made of plastic here. Don't use any metal objects here. You could scratch your dashboard up here. But you can see I'm prying towards the back side that faces the driver here. This is the side you want to lift up on, and then lift up towards the windshield here. Just go real slow and take it easy, and you shouldn't damage anything. And you can see mine came loose pretty easily there. It didn't really take a lot of force at all. And these tools are really handy. So pick some of those up. But now you can see it's a tiny speaker right here, and I'm going to go ahead and detach the wiring harness real quick. And you can see that's very easy to do as well. And basically there's just a couple of Phillips screws here holding this thing in. So we'll just remove this, remove the Phillips screws and replace the speaker. So by far, this is the easiest speaker to remove from the dashboard area here in your SI. Just 2 Phillips screws and the whole thing comes right out. But you can see how tiny that little magnet is. It's got a paper dome tweeter as well as a paper mid-range area there, so it's just not very high quality. It's going to have a dull sound versus a nice crisp polyurethane speaker with a nice tweeter in it. So we'll switch it out. So you can see this is going to be an excellent upgrade. The magnet is much bigger than the stock configuration. It's polyurethane instead of paper, and the tweeter is a much better setup. It's got a very nice tweeter compared to the stock speaker. And you can see I'm trying to figure out which way I want to place my electrical leads. So I kind of put it in this position, and the good news is it only fits in one way here. So this is the wrong way here. You want to spin it around the opposite direction. I figured that out because I could not get it to line up with the Phillips screw holes here. And then once I turn it in this direction right here, as long as your panel is laying the way my panel is, this will line up perfect here. And then you can just go ahead and insert your Phillips screws and tighten them down. So if you're wondering exactly what speakers these are the JL Audio C2 350X, and these are the only coaxial speakers that'll fit in the Civic Si's dashboard, so you can't go wrong here. There's only one set that'll fit. Okay, once you have it mounted, it's time to place it back into the dash. But I decided, instead of using the little harness from Crutchfield, to see if I could depin this little OEM plug-in and just use the wires. And it really came apart pretty easily, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute if you want to. Or you can just use the little harness from Crutchfield. But when it comes to the wiring colors here, usually the white or the light colored wire will be power, and any colored wire like let's say a bright color like orange or yellow or something will be a negative. So right here, that's the case. The white wire is the power. And in this case, it's a blue wire will be your negative here. So I just decided to see if I could depin the factory harness, and I was able to do it pretty easily. You don't have to do this. It's probably going to be easier for you to just, use the little harness setup that comes from Crutchfield, but I just wanted to try it and it worked pretty well. So if you want to, it's possible, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But when you put the speaker back in, the speaker cover, start from the rear and then push down towards the windshield there, and it should snap back in pretty easily. So let me quickly show you how I depin the OEM speaker harness, and basically just get a very small flathead screwdriver and lift up on this tab. This releases very easily, and then you're going to spin the whole thing around. The wires will be coming out of this part right here. So once you get to this angle, you're going to push in on these little internal tabs, and I'm sorry it's very blurry right here, but I couldn't get my camera to focus. But get your little small flathead screwdriver and push towards the center that way, and same with the other side. Get that little tab and push it towards the center, and as you push that little tab towards the center, you can slide the wire right out. It'd be better if you had 3 hands right here, but you can do it because I did it pretty easily. Just push that tab towards the center and the wires will slide right out, and that just decreased the bulk. I didn't have to use that Crutchfield extra harness in there, and I just thought I'd try it, and it worked pretty easily for me, so you might want to give it a go. Or you can use the wiring harness from Crutchfield. So now it's time to remove the door panel. Of course, there's some techniques that we'll have to go through. We'll be removing this little power window switch, that little cover right there for the door handle, and there's only a few screws holding this thing on, so it's not too bad at all. So now it's time to remove this plastic panel that's covering the handle here, and that's not aluminum or anything, it's just plastic with like a silver paint on it. And I thought I could just get a small pick in there and grab the corner of it, but I quickly realized that I was going to damage the plastic if I used a pick, so don't use a pick. And sorry, my head's going to be in and out of the way here a little bit, but I'll make sure you get all the information you need without my head in the way. So I realized that wasn't going to work, so I used a plastic panel removal tool, and it was just too bulky. I couldn't get it into that small little crease, so quickly realized that that wasn't going to fit either. So I took a closer look at it, and I finally realized that there's actually a very, very tiny little tab that you can get a small flathead screwdriver in, and it fits right here. I mean, it's just a very tiny little tab in there, and you can fit your flathead screwdriver in there and remove this covering. So at this point I had to get a larger screwdriver, but it was still able to fit in that tab, and once I turned the screwdriver sideways, it clicked it and released the bottom just a little bit, and I was able to get my plastic panel removal tool in there. And now at this point you want to go nice and slow. There's quite a few tabs in here, and you don't want to snap them. They're very kind of delicate, to be honest. So I just started pulling them very slowly and got my little tool in here and just kind of worked my way up. There's a big plastic tab on the very top of this thing, and I'll show you that in a minute. But yeah, just start from the bottom and then it'll finally release. Just go slow. You don't want to break anything. You see that little tab that clicks in on top up there? And now we've got this thing off finally. And you can see there's two tiny little Phillips screws right here that we need to remove next. Okay, these Phillips screws come out really easily, so there's no problem there. And there's one that's up top on the handle that's out of frame of the camera. Sorry, I didn't have my camera framed up right, but there's one up top. Remove that, and the key here is just remove the screw. Do not try to remove the handle. I'll yank on it in a minute and you'll see, but it flexes, but it's attached with some plastic tabs to the panel. It's not to be removed. There's only a Phillips screw that needs to be removed to release the panel, but don't remove the handle. There's one down here too as well. You can see I pull on it and realize no. There's a little covering here that covers this little Phillips screw inside this handle area. Easy to get to with a pick, and then you remove that little Phillips screw, and we've got one left, and there's the covering right there. And we got one more screw to remove. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get my panel off, and because there's one hidden down in here. Make sure to remove this little Phillips screw, and then we're ready to remove the panel from the door. Now we can take our plastic panel removal tool and start working on this little corner down in here. And now this is a little bit tight. If your panel's never been removed, it may take a little finagling to get your fingers under there, but what you're trying to do is pry the panel up just enough to get your fingertips under this corner, and then you're gonna kind of lightly tug on it here. It may take a little while. It took me a bit of time to get this to break loose, but finally I got it to break loose, and that's why I'm so happy right there, because it took me a while. But once you get that one tab released, then you can slowly work your way around the edges here and remove all the little tabs. So just take your time, go slow, and you may have to just kind of jerk it a little bit to pop it loose, but don't get too aggressive. You don't want to tear your panel up here, your door panel. Just go all the way around the edges and break everything loose. Once you get all the tabs around the edges of the door removed, you can stand up and then grab the top of this door panel. You can see I'm looking for a good spot right here, and so towards the top is the best way to go, and then grab it and pull straight up. And then we can now remove the door panel, and we can get to work on replacing this mid-range speaker down towards the bottom of this door. Now, I did tell you I wasn't going to change out my tweeters, and I'm not, but I do want to show you how to remove this panel with a plastic panel removal tool right here. And there's two clips on this side right here, this edge that I'm working on. There's two little clips that hold this thing on. So if you go nice and slow, you can remove these just, nice and gentle. Don't get too aggressive because you could break this little piece. But the main reason I decided not to use the little tweeters that came with my mid-range was because I would have to modify this piece, and these tweeters are sufficient like we talked about earlier, so I really didn't want to have to modify this piece to get aftermarket tweeter in here. But it's pretty easy to remove this little harness. Just push in on the clip and it comes loose. So if you did want to swap out your tweeters, it's pretty simple here. Now it's just one bolt to remove this mid-range speaker, but I'm going to push on the speaker with my hand. I want you to hear this thing, this OEM speaker. It's pretty hilarious. Let me come back. One screw, but I wanted to show you this part, which is kind of crazy. Is listen, you hear the frogs, sorry, but you hear that? I mean, this thing's pumping. I don't know, it's pretty hokey. Even with the frogs, you can still hear that. And the car's driving by, you can hear this speaker. Man, it's got to sound better with a new speaker. It's got to. So now we know how Honda saves so much money on the stereo system. So now that we know that, we can go ahead and remove this. Now I'm going to use a 8mm socket to release this bolt up top, and then there's two plastic tabs on the bottom of the speaker. I tried a Phillips screwdriver on there and it didn't readily break loose, so I just whipped out the socket and it made short work of the situation. So it's quite a long screw here, so that's all we have to remove to break this loose. Now this thing's kind of fused. I guess it's baked onto the side of the door a little bit, so you may have to knock it loose or coerce it a little bit. I'm going to use a plastic panel removal tool here to kind of break it loose. Kind of work from the top. I was having problems getting my tool in at the top, so I kind of went on the side, but remember the two tabs are on the very bottom, so you don't want to pull up on that. It'll snap the tabs off. But with a little bit of tinkering, I was able to break it loose. And now all we have to do is release the harness here, and we can remove the speaker. So since I've got a aftermarket speaker mount, we're not going to need to save this part of the speaker at all. This speaker is actually fused into this speaker mount, so we're going to have to toss the whole thing anyway. We can't really use that to mount our new speakers in. Now this step is optional, but I'm going to be placing some sound deadening material, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe down the inside of the door with some rubbing alcohol and a nice lint-free rag. You have to have a very clean surface to place the sound deadening onto. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe the inside of the door panel out the best I can. There's not a lot of room here to work with, but I was able to get my hand in there and get the area that I wanted cleaned up. And basically, I realized after the fact that most of the vibration is coming from the door panel itself, not really coming from inside the door, but a little bit of sound deadening is not going to hurt. So now I'm going to take a heat gun and just make sure I got everything super dry after I've used the rubbing alcohol, because you don't want anything any moisture at all in there when you're putting the sound deadening material in. It's a bit chilly out tonight, so I'm going to kind of heat the sound deadening material up a little bit with the heat gun, but if it's warm outside, you won't need to do this at all. But basically, most of the vibrations, now that I've completed the job, seem to be coming from the door panel itself. So if you go through the door panel, you might be able to find a part of it that might be loose, and you can secure that and decrease any sound vibrations coming from the panel. So now that I've got everything clean and warm, I'm going to go ahead and start placing in the sound deadening material in the door. Now you can use as much or as little as you want. You can only get so far through this little speaker hole though. Make sure that you have a nice roller to mat the sound deadening material down. You want to make sure it's nice and flat and compressed, because you don't want any moisture getting between the sound deadening material and the door panel itself. So here's a little look at the inside of my door after I've installed the sound deadening material. You can see the roller marks on there. Make sure you just use that roller and hit every square inch of it. You can see I put it above and below that bar that's inside the door there, and a little bit on the bar itself. This should decrease some of the vibrations coming from the speaker itself. So now I'm going to place the aftermarket wiring harness onto the OEM wiring harness. This is the one we got from Crutchfield. So that just only goes on one way, by the way. So I tried to put it on the wrong way and it wouldn't fit. So now it just clicks in, and that just keeps us from having to modify any of the speaker wire at all. Okay, now it's time to mount your mid-range speaker to the Crutchfield speaker mount that was provided, and you want to make sure these two tabs are facing down. And so when you place your speaker in the mount, you want to make sure that the electrical connections right here are facing down towards the bottom as well. It just makes it easier to wire up. So the only thing you have to make sure you do is line up one of the holes to your speaker with that hole that we'll remove that bolt from, that long bolt that holds the speaker in. Remember that one that we did earlier? Make sure that you get one of these speaker hole mounts to line up right there, and then the rest we're going to have to actually do a little bit of fabrication. We're going to make a small little hole with a drill to mount the other 3 screws onto the speaker mount itself. So yeah, you will have to do a little bit of fabrication here, but it's not hard at all. Just mark those little holes that you have left over, and then put a small guide hole in with a drill, and then we can go ahead and mount the speaker into this little plastic housing. Okay, the only thing I didn't show was, see that felt that's lined around the outside of the speaker mount? That came with the speakers, so I placed that little felt strip all the way around so that when we mount this mid-range to the actual plastic housing, that it will keep it from rattling, and it'll make it nice and snug and airtight as well. So make sure that you use some type of felt when you place the speaker onto that, or some type of padding to keep it from rattling and give it a nice snug fit. Now what I'm about to do is place some sound deadening on the back side of the speaker mount here. This is an optional step. You don't have to do this, but I thought this might help decrease any vibration between the door and the speaker mount itself. Now what I'm doing actually is placing the sound deadening material, the sticky part, down onto the actual mount itself, so I don't have to get any of that sound deadening material onto the door itself. So if I ever replace these speakers, the sound deadening material will come off with the speaker mount itself, and I don't have to clean all this stuff off. If you've ever used this material, you know that it's sort of like tar, and it kind of sticks to everything, especially painted surfaces. So this way it'll have aluminum surface up against the door, and it won't stick to it. You can see now I've got it all the way around the back side of the mount, plus I've got that little bit of padding between the speaker and the mount itself on this side, so that should really cut back on any sound vibrations we get from the speaker and the mount when we place it into the door. Now all we have to do is connect the speakers, and basically here you're going to be using the white wire for the power or positive, and the black wire will be your negative or ground. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that when you place the wire onto the speaker that it actually kind of clicks in. You don't want any loose connections there. That could cause problems with sound later on. So make sure it's nice and snug and it snaps into the speaker and does not have any play at all. So once you get those wires connected, just go ahead and place the speaker mount back into the door and bolt it up with that bolt that we pulled out earlier, that one long bolt that goes on the top, and we are essentially done now with the front part of the SI speaker install. Okay, now it's time to get started on the rear speakers, and you don't have to do anything except put the seats down. Back here, you don't have to remove these panels or take out the bottom of the seat or anything like that. Just 3 panels. And this is one of them right here. And I've already removed the little plastic covering that says side air curtain right here. And I used a plastic panel removal tool. And basically, I just kind of went all the way around the edge, nice and slow, and slowly pried it loose, and then it just came on out. So it wasn't too hard. And if you're wondering what it looked like before I did that, that's what it looks like before. Now this is the after shot. So now we have to remove this little clip, and you just want to be real delicate here. Just squeeze it together nice and easy, and then you're going to slowly pull it out. You may have to kind of work it a little bit up and down to remove it, but it's not too hard. And then that'll slide out. Now down in there is a little bolt that you have to remove. and I didn't get it on camera, but there's a bolt down in there. And then this little area is where you can hang some clothes if you need to, and there's a little bolt in there, a nice little, I think it's a 10 mil bolt in there. So remove that bolt and this bolt, and we can get to prying on this panel. And when we start prying on this area and work our way back towards the window, and then all we have is this panel right here on the very rear. This panel needs to be removed as well. So 3 panels total, and we can get access to the speakers. So now I'm going to give you a little tip on how to remove these little rear panels. They're a little bit difficult because of these 2 clips right here, that brown little clip. And once I pulled the edge of the panel back, I was able to slide a flashlight in here because I couldn't really see those clips or where they were. And then I got a plastic panel removal tool in here and wedged it in here and was able to pop it loose. Now, it takes a while, and I actually stuck a flashlight inside there so I could visualize it, because it was kind of dark. But once you get that clip loose, and that second clip right down there on the end, it popped out really easily. But I pried at the very edge of it and then got to these 2 clips, and those are the 2 main clips that hold it in. Now at the very end, this thing just slides in, so this is easy to remove. But it's those 2 little brown clips that hold everything up, and if that's the harder one to get loose, once you break that one loose, the second one pops loose pretty easily. So as you can see, I'm starting here on the edge, and now I've got that pried down. I've got a little tool in here to try to break that little first brown tab loose, and that was the most difficult one, like we talked about just a second ago. And then once I got that one loose, I kind of laid on my back here and started kind of using both hands to give it a little more stability, and started pulling on that second clip, and it didn't take near as much force to break this one loose. So just give it a nice slight tug and it should pop on loose. And now we've got the panel removed, and you can see that was the difficult one right there. Okay, so the clips for this back panel, they go down. So theoretically, we just have to push straight up here. So I'm gonna start from the edge. You can see all I did was tap it kind of hard, and it popped right up. So if it doesn't pop loose the very first time, give it a couple whacks and it should break on loose. And you can see I've got it loose now, and I'm gonna take the seat belt and get it out from underneath this panel here, and now we can just slowly take it nice and easy. Now you don't want to yank it or anything, but slowly pull this thing forward and out of the way here. So it was pretty simple. There's no screws to remove, it's just tabs only. So that was the easiest panel to remove all day. Okay, so let's take a look and see what the speakers look like back here and how hard it's going to be to remove them. One thing I didn't mention is that I disconnected the tweeter right here and the mid-range and the subwoofer on both sides before I removed that back panel, because the tweeters are actually embedded into that rear panel. So I didn't mention that. Make sure you remove all of the electrical harnesses to the speakers before you pull this panel off. But now you can see what we've got here is mid-range right here, and we've got the subwoofer in the middle right here, and then we've got the other mid-range right here. So you can see there's just one bolt holding the mid-range in, and that should be easy to remove. And there's 4 bolts holding that subwoofer in here. So there's that one bolt right here, remove that, speaker comes out. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 right there for the subwoofer, and then 1 right here. So I'm not going to film that part. I'm just going to release those, and then we'll pick up with the speaker placement. Let's quickly go over the OEM mid-range speaker real quick. And you could theoretically cut this speaker out of this little mount here and reuse this mount to mount your new speakers. Unfortunately, one of mine disintegrated when I was removing it. I guess it got sunbaked and just cracked all apart. So, but you could just cut that out and then break the little plastic tabs there and reuse this if you wanted to, because Crutchfield didn't send me anything to mount my mid-range speakers in. So if you can, try to save these mounts and reuse these. Now let's take a quick look at the subwoofer. Now we know why I didn't have much bass, because it basically doesn't even have a magnet back here. It's pretty hokey, just like the front speakers were. So yeah, let's get rid of this thing and put a real subwoofer in. So let's talk about the space where the 4-inch mid-range are supposed to go in the back. Once you remove the speaker mount, you could easily get a 5 or 6-inch mid-range in here. if you want to go larger, and I would have if I would have known, but I've got this little 4-inch because that's what they recommended with the speaker mount. So I got a coaxial instead of a mid-range. I wouldn't recommend a coaxial because that gives me 4 tweeters now in the back, but I had to use some sound deadening material to cover the excess holes that were left over from removing that speaker mount. So you could definitely go bigger. And once I got that mounted in there, I went ahead and used the speaker harness hookup right here. It just plugs right in and it goes to the speakers, and the other one is the tweeter right there. So let's move on to the subwoofer setup. So I used a Kicker Comp C 8-inch sub. This is the biggest subwoofer you could possibly fit in there, and I'm going to show you how I got it in there. But it's a 4 ohm versus a 2 ohm. Your headset wants a 2 ohm setup, so you can see I've taken a wire and run it from the negative terminal to the negative terminal on the other side. And then I did the same thing with the positive wire. I took a wire and ran it from the positive to the positive on the other side. And what that does is steps it down to a 2 ohm system instead of a 4 ohm. It's very easy to do. So, you know, go ahead and do that. If you change out your deck, you can go back to a 4 ohm if you want to, if you go for the aftermarket deck. But yeah, it was pretty easy to wire this up to turn it into a 2 ohm setup. And then I got the little speaker harness and threaded it right in here. White is the power, and the black one is the negative wire. And now I can just plug it straight into the OEM harness setup. So let's talk about how we mounted the 3 speakers back here. And basically we had to get your drill out, and we had to drill some guide holes from underneath. You can't go from up top because the windows makes it just too hard to get a drill in there, especially when this big. So I had to come from underneath. But basically I just set the speakers in there, marked out where the holes should be, and then came from underneath and drilled straight up through. I got some self-tapping screws from Lowe's to mount the speakers in here. So you'll probably have to supply your own hardware unless your speakers come with some hardware. But yeah, it wasn't too bad. Then I did the same thing for the mid-range speakers here. You can see I've got little guide holes for the mid-range speakers. And then I just placed some of that sound deadening material around the area where I'm going to be mounting the speaker, so I won't have any rattling going on, and it gives a good seal around the speaker. Now to slide this subwoofer in, you're going to have to pull this hook forward. This is for the child car seat, and you have to pull it forward just a little bit, and it's not too bad. You can bend it back into place. I just kind of yanked on it a little bit, nice and slow, and pulled it forward just enough to squeeze this thing through. So it's not that bad, but don't worry, you can bend it back, and just go slow and be careful. If you have tinted windows, you don't want to scrape your tint when you're placing this subwoofer in. So you have to go real slow and easy. Just do it nice and gently. And once I got it past the hook, then I got my little harness and threaded it back underneath right here. You can see me doing that. And now we can go ahead and get this seated. But this is the biggest subwoofer that you could possibly put in here because the magnet is an issue when you're closing the trunk. So the Comp C 8-inch is the largest one you can use. Remember, once you remove these, make sure you dispose of these properly because you do not want these to fall into the wrong hands. Somebody could get hurt trying to use these and suffer bad sound quality. We don't want that to happen to anybody. So I recommend disposing of them this way. That's proper disposal. Yeah, that's better right there. I'll show you my settings here in a minute, but we'll do a little test run here. And it's definitely got more bass. It's actually making some of the panels vibrate, so that's not the speakers, it's just the panels. Here we go. You can see this thing's really picked up a lot of bass. It's got some really great high notes. It's just a lot fuller. It's got like a wide range now of tones. It's not so monotone. It's not so flat. It's really got highs and lows and mids. It's a huge improvement. Definitely worth it if you feel like tackling this job. It was a little difficult doing the rear speakers, but hey, you know, no pain, no gain, baby. So until next time, you know what to do. Just keep on repairing.